Hello, everybody. Adam Parks here with another episode of Receivables Roundtable. Today, I am here with Brad McCurnin with Harvest Strategy Group, talking a little bit about litigation and how to get your litigation network off the ground or better managed. How you doing today, Brad?
Doing great. Thanks for having me here, Adam. Pleasure to be here.
Awesome. For anybody that's watching that's not familiar with you, could you tell everybody a little bit about yourself and how you got to the seat that you're in today?
Absolutely. My story might be kind of common in that I was looking for a job out of college. This was in the early 90s, and economy was a little struggling there. And I was just looking for an opportunity, and I applied for this job with a collection law firm in Baton Rouge, Louisiana. Didn't have any idea what it was about. And interestingly, as I hear from a lot of folks, once I got into it, I started to like it. And I liked a couple aspects of it. One was just the helpful aspect of the collections industry, helping consumers resolve an unpaid debt feels of value to me, and I like that aspect of it, actually. And then the whole financial and really analytics piece of the industry was a surprise to me. And I really grasped onto that too. And then just a couple of years after starting that work, a company came on the market called the National Attorney Network. I don't know if you remember that, but that was from a long time ago. And I think they were the first. I think they were the first national attorney network to put together a group of attorneys that would be centrally managed. And we were one of those firms. And this is before the internet was what it is today. So they actually they actually shipped us a PC. We put that PC in an office by itself, and we had to code the activity every day that we were doing on the files. It was very, very archaic from today's standards, but it really intrigued me at that point, and I just knew at that point that looked like the future to me. That looked like control and oversight and data and analytics and information. And I really thought at that point I would like to work one day on the network side. I'd like to be in on that side of things. Mm-hmm. And so I worked for that law firm for about 10 years. I moved back to Denver, Colorado, and which I really consider my home state here, and then had an opportunity to meet just a number of wonderful people, some key people that are in my life today. And we were able to together form Harvest Strategy Group. Mm-hmm. And that was about 15 years ago. And I just feel like I'm really living my dream here as president and CEO of the company, and as a part owner of the company. And I do really enjoy what I do.
Well, it sounds like you guys are working on some really great things over there, and to kind of see that progression of starting on the law firm side, seeing kind of the early stages of how the national networks were going to come together, and then participating in that kind of expansion into that space is really interesting. Which, I think we've alluded a little bit here as to what Harvest Strategy Group does, but can you tell us a little bit about Harvest and what you guys do there?
Yeah, absolutely. We do the same thing today that we did 15 years ago when we started. We were really started as managers of inventory, building strategies for our clients for recovery. So we service banks, fintechs, auto finance companies, and debt buyers are really the kind of primary clients that we serve. And we do this through building strategies on the strategy and design piece, and then we implement that through a network of law firms and agencies, and then we have the management and the oversight piece, which is really pulling it through to make sure that the work that's expected to be done is actually being done, and we call that just active engagement. And it's just it was a critical part of the business when we started it. Still critical today. If you're not actively managing it, it's not going to happen. It's a critical part of getting results.
You mean it's not magic? It's not just, hey, these accounts are
Not
going to go for
automatic.
litigation and now poof, I've got
Exactly.
judgments and cash flow.
Yeah,
Well, that's good
yeah,
to
I've
know.
seen, yeah, absolutely.
So one of the things that we should probably talk about then is kind of that inbound funnel of accounts that are going into that litigation strategy, right? Because we're all buying, bulk portfolio assets, and as we're going through that process, we need to identify which recovery channel or which recovery stream is most appropriate for each one of the individual accounts. So can you
Yeah.
talk to me a little bit about, how you go about or how you suggest to clients that they go about selecting the appropriate accounts for that litigation channel versus kind of a more standard call and collect or other recovery strategies?
Yeah, absolutely. We do this all the time, and it starts with a conversation about what are your objectives? What are you trying to achieve here? What are the results that you're trying to accomplish? And so, that it might sound simple, like, well, we want to maximize our recoveries, of course.
Right.
But the litigation piece is a long term play, so it
Mhm.
takes a long term mindset on it, and then the longer your mindset is for that expectation, then we would say, well, then you can go deeper into the file for to get more into litigation. So,
Mhm.
but not everybody's in the same place, has the same objectives. So the first thing we're doing is we're building that strategy. We do that through a product called ProScore, and ProScore was designed 15 years ago, the year we started the company, because it
Mhm.
was the first question that we got from clients, which is, okay, well, I want to litigate, but how do which accounts do I litigate? And so
Sure.
this model has really been a cornerstone of our company and our development. It's been refined over the years and proven to be accurate. And that's kind of where it's a tool we use to start in the segmentation process. And then, as I said, we set up performance management expectations. There's SLAs that document that, and then we manage that through, and then really risk mitigation is on top of all of that. So we have a whole compliance department, certified
Mhm.
compliance officers working in that department to oversee, monitor, and really from just a risk and compliance perspective, completely separate from recovery, to make sure that that risk is mitigated and that requirements are being met.
Sure. And I mean, that makes a lot of sense. Now, if somebody was looking at dipping their toe into the litigation space, right? So, an
Mhm.
organization that owns assets but doesn't have an established litigation channel and maybe doesn't truly understand where they can really find the value from that channel. So they just want to kind of get started. How would you suggest
Mhm.
that somebody kind of get that, take that first step towards evaluating how litigation should fit into their overall recovery strategy?
Yeah, we have that conversation pretty frequently, actually, and it really starts with ProScore again, because what
Mhm.
ProScore does is it segments the inventory so that we can see, for example, what is the state distribution, what is the
Mhm.
balance distribution. Now, each state is different as for its uh, capabilities to the friendliness to litigation. Some states are better
Sure.
to litigate
Filing
in. Some,
fees, like,
yes,
yeah.
court costs are different. Exactly, post judgment remedies are different. So the state distribution becomes very important.
Mhm.
Balance becomes important too, because you need a balance that's high enough to support the costs in the state.
Mhm.
So that's really where we start. And I would say, um, if for clients that or creditors that don't have a legal strategy, or maybe just a small one, I mean, it's a real risk. It's a real loss not to have a legal strategy. And one of the most obvious reasons for that is statute of limitations, which is another thing that ProScore checks for. And without a legal strategy, statutes are expiring within 3, 4, 5 years typically,
Mhm.
which means after that expires, you can't file suit any longer. But if you have a legal program and you're filing that suit at the right time before statute expires, and you're getting a judgment, most judgments are good for 20 years. So you can see how that. So if you get a judgment, you file the lien, then that judgment lives on for for decades, and it extends the recoverability of the file by just an enormous amount. And without a
Right.
legal program, it's really losing that capability. So I would say most important thing is, if you don't have a legal strategy yet, is to get started in a way that's comfortable for the organization, to get familiar with it and the requirements for affidavits, requirements for media. We walk through all that as we're working with our clients to try to build the right strategy.
Understood. So one of the things that we've always talked about from a litigation strategy standpoint is that it really does require patience, right?
Yeah.
You have to be a patient investor to kind of go through that process, because the time period between, acquiring accounts and starting to see cash flow, and then you have the filing fee and court cost kind of investment on top of the purchase of the portfolio itself.
Yep.
Can you give kind of the listeners and
Yeah.
viewers an understanding as to what do we mean by patience, right? Like, what kind of time frame should they be considering, and ultimately, how does it lengthen the liquidation curve?
Yeah. Yeah. It's a great question. And but the reason it takes patience is because the litigation process first requires the filing of the lawsuit, which requires an investment of court costs. And then there's a period of time where that lawsuit then needs to be served. It needs the time to answer has to expire for the consumer. Then we're able to request a default judgment. Then that default judgment will be granted, and then we can move forward with post-judgment remedies like garnishments. And that can take a while. Particularly, COVID extended that with limited resources at courts.
Yeah.
So the first year of a legal program can be negative in terms of it's an investment period of costs.
Mhm.
Usually after the first year, then we're positive. But then thereafter, that recovery continues. We have seen in portfolios for a decade or two later. So when you're looking at a collection curve that's that long, it makes that first year investment look pretty small, which in scope it really is. And so that's the patience piece. And I'll also add in that ProScore is also designed around this whole concept of return on court cost invested. So
Mhm.
that's what
Okay.
creditors are doing here. They're investing costs in the file for an eventual return in the future, and ProScore is designed around that. And it also has one other kind of unique aspect to it, which is address stability, which is to make sure that we to the greatest degree we can, we have an accurate address for service, because
Mhm.
service of the suit is critical to get to the next stages. Um, and
Can't serve them, you
so
can't sue them.
right, exactly. So that's the long-term focus. We think it's important to consider in any portfolio. And different clients just go at have different objectives, and so they have different aggressiveness, if you will, in terms of how many they're suing, how deep they're suing, and how much they're investing over time.
Sure.
So
And I think that makes a lot of sense, right? Like, from that perspective, we're always talking about the timelines here, right? So it's going to take a little bit more of an investment into the time up front in order to extend your liquidation curve for an immeasurable period of time. I mean, you're talking 10, 20 years compared to a 3-year statute in some states. You're really extending the time period by which you can count on that consumer's life situation improving, changing,
yep,
and being
exactly.
able to satisfy that outstanding debt, because over a 3-year period, not much might change, but over a 10, 15, 20-year period, lives change significantly, right?
Yeah,
And so that does
exactly.
really open up the
Exactly.
opportunity there. Now,
Yeah.
as a manager of kind of a national litigation network here, that means you guys are working with a whole bunch of different attorneys, right? It's not like you're
Yeah.
just trying to
Yeah.
manage one or two firms here.
Yeah.
So tell me a little
Yeah.
bit about the compliance
Yeah.
oversight that you are ultimately undertaking on behalf of your clients to keep and to ensure that all of the law firms and agencies in the network are operating appropriately.
Yeah, that's a great question. running this business today is not like it was 15 years ago when we started. It's gotten much more complex, a lot more oversight. We deal with, and from the beginning, we only deal with collection law firms. So these are law firms that 100% of their business is in the collection industry. So these are professionals that know the business, that they know recovery, they know how to run a compliant program, and we have the best law firms in our network to help accomplish all of our clients' objectives. And we have in most states multiple law firms that, depending on the inventory and the type of debt, to make sure that we get it to the right place, get it to the right law firm for the best results. And then you mentioned compliance oversight. It's just par for the course today. You have to have a robust compliance and oversight. You have to have a robust InfoSec policy. You have to manage it. You have to validate it. Call calibration, the whole process we have in place, and we report back to our clients on the results on a regular basis, monthly basis, to show how things are moving along. And when we do find anything that's out of compliance, it's remediated, it's tracked, it's closed is the important thing that's necessary in that area. So it's just something that you have to be doing these days to compete in the industry. And really the results of it is that we find particularly litigation to be one of the lowest risk strategies, one of the lowest risk alternatives, just because of the quality partners that we have doing the collection work and filing the lawsuits, and then with our additional oversight on top of it. It's a very compliant program.
Completely understood. So let's kind of wrap up with talking about the real world application of a litigation strategy, because we've talked a little bit about kind of why you would want to do it, how you get started, but like, what are the real over benefits? From my perspective as a debt buyer through the years, it's been about building an annuity of cash flow, right? Not just constantly having to put new portfolios into the mix in order to maintain cash flow. But in order to build those annuities, you got to make sure that you've got patient investment capital, right? Like you're not going to be able to turn out payments in the same methodology. Looking at that longer liquidation curve again, requiring some of that patience. And then looking at, for me, every business or every strategy comes down to three things: the cash flow, the timing of the cash flow, and the risk associated with that cash flow. And so what we've talked about here was that, the cash flows are there, right? You're providing the consumers with a longer opportunity by which to collect. The timing of that cash flow will be a little bit elongated up front in terms of the investment strategy, but the tail will run significantly longer in order for you to continue collecting payments into the distant future. And then, like you were saying, the risk associated with that cash flow is actually significantly less, because you're not having these frequent phone or email or text message communications with the consumers. And ultimately, every time that you interact with a consumer, you're increasing the likelihood of there being some sort of frivolous suit associated with it, or claim made against you, regardless of whether or not your behavior is appropriate.
Absolutely. That's been our experience, is that it's a low risk system that we built here with all of the compliance and oversight that we have. And on the cash flow front, we've been doing this long enough that we have lots of data, lots of experience, lots of models, that when we're talking with a client, when I say we're building the strategy, we're figuring out what the client's needs are, and we're putting a custom strategy together, we can put together that projection that will go. We typically start out with a 4-year projection. We don't go the 10 years, but even though we know it'll be that long, so we start with a 4-year projection, and we can estimate what we think is going to come out of this in terms of both gross recovery, net recovery, court cost, net back to the client. So it's a way to see in advance, what do we think is going to happen here over in year 1, 2, 3, and 4? And it's just always a it's just a helpful exercise to go through to see the numbers. And then when we build that projection, then we will track ourselves to that over time to see how we are doing to how we've initially what we initially thought was going to be done. So it's just it's not it's a very scientific and an organized and experience based process that we go through to build that strategy.
I think that's an important part of it, right? Having the right strategy for any collection account or any distressed account is incredibly important. Whether you're gonna
Absolutely.
right, either you're gonna collect it, you're gonna sue it, or you're gonna sell it, or you're
Yeah.
gonna do nothing, which is not generally a great strategy if you have a fiduciary responsibility to
Yeah,
your
that's
investors or
right.
your company. So one of the other three strategies tends to be, one of your best options there. And it sounds like your team has really put a lot of time and energy into that kind of lawsuit channel. For those of you that are watching, if you have additional questions that you'd like to ask Brad and I, feel free to leave those in the comments below. Both Brad and I will be responding to comments here on LinkedIn and YouTube. If you have any additional topics that you'd like to see us discuss, you can leave those in the comments as well below. But Brad, I really appreciate you coming on and having a chat with me
Thank
today. I
you.
feel like I learn a little something from every conversation, and you guys clearly have been doing some great things on the litigation space, and looking forward to continuing to learn from you in the future.
Fantastic. Thanks, Adam. Great speaking with you today.
Awesome. For all of you that are watching, feel free to leave comments below, and we'll talk to you again soon. Thanks so much.
Thank you.